Seeing none. Councillor Gardiner, you wanted to move something?
I would like to move the decline.
A staff recommendation?
Yes, please.
Yep, very good. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hammond is seconding. Go ahead, Councillor Gardiner.
Thank you. Over a year ago, July 27th, 2023, staff recommended that this rezoning application be declined. July of this year, staff again recommended that this application be declined. And today, the recommendation remains to decline. So staff has been very clear on their opinion of not only the development, but the fit of it into that neighborhood and onto the lot in which it is proposed. And I recall when that lot was being sold, longtime owners owned that lot and a couple houses nearby, and they were being sold, and a lot of developers were after that land at that time, and that was just a few years ago. Now, I realize that the recommendation before us today is somewhat of a response to the direction given by a majority of council over a year ago and again 4 months ago. And I'd like right now to thank the many residents who have written to council over the past 3 years and for staff's assessment of the proposal. I concur, as I said, with staff's ongoing recommendation to decline. This proposal does not fit within the current zoning and, more importantly, within the OCP, or even the initial considerations of blanket zoning being examined in the OCP update currently underway. This parcel of land was designated RK. It was seen by the community as being reserved for what we now call missing middle housing. Density sought now is a 5-fold increase over the current zoning, which is already quite generous, and or a 0.5 to 2.5-fold increase over the OCP. This neighborhood has always supported diverse housing. It used to be the city's example of how there could be such a mix of housing. But this lot, that's why this lot was reserved for townhouse type structures. This proposal is not transitional between the Harborside complex to the west and small homes to the east, or between Laurel Point complex and the traditional homes south of Kingston. During discussions on this project, I truly appreciated a question from a colleague which referenced the OCP update engagement process and what has now, with a couple of development proposals, been described as emerging urban residential zone. The question posed was whether this would be considered fitting with the emerging urban residential zone. Staff responded then and responded again today, no. This development is far too much, especially when added to a highly densified neighborhood. But some things have changed over the past few months. The City of Victoria has exceeded the provincially set housing target, and in 1 year is 30% of the way to the 5-year target. The housing density in James Bay is about 40% higher than for the city as a whole. Density for the sake of density and bragging rights to a number of units built or approved is not needed in James Bay. Council has received many, many thoughtful submissions. A couple stood out for me. One submission provided by a resident, a former elected official, a former director of transportation planning and environmental studies, and who was recognized as an expert in land use by the Ontario Municipal Board, wrote a very considered response to us. He had a 5-page analysis of the proposal, and he offered a very simple paragraph which really speaks to governance. I am concerned that public consultation with this council often appears to be a little more than a preconceived notion which is written into a formal process, something to be entertained in due course, and my reference here is not just with this specific application. And I don't know this person, but his letter was just really so considered. I believe that consideration of this proposal further would make a mockery of the work underway by staff, which is the renewal of the official community plan. Disrespect of staff's dedication to process and planning principles. Disrespect of the taxpayer. We now know we're going to be spending $1 million on the OCP. And if we're going to accept the OCP, let's respect it now. Finally, to the residents who have already spoken to council at evening meetings, Those who were cited as James Bay residents, who for some, at least one person, thought should be restricted in speaking to council. I found that action very shameful, and I cannot apologize for what someone else said about you and what someone was permitted to say. It is up to him. So I strongly recommend that this be declined.